Who sells a coup, and what is Tehran worth? Why not just let Iran build a nuclear bomb? Seriously. Why be shy about it? Every country deserves equal rights and equal opportunities, right? Sure, let's hand out grenades on airplanes too. Equal opportunity. Let's allow smoking at gas stations, freedom of self-expression. Let's even give out flamethrowers in traffic jams, keep the flow dynamic. So why is America digging its heels in against an Iranian bomb? Because a bomb isn't just a weapon. It's an official license for all the neighbors to go crazy. Give Iran the bomb and within 2 years Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and a dozen other countries who barely operate an elevator button with confidence will want one too. And the nuclear club stops being a club and turns into a dorm kitchen with a nuclear kettle and cockroaches in uniform. If Iran gets the nuclear button officially, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt won't think about it. They'll sprint to the nuclear supermarket with a shopping cart. And in a few years it's not 9 nuclear buttons, it's 49. The nuclear club becomes a nuclear Black Friday hypermarket. Crowds. Panic. Screaming. And someone already pressed the wrong button. The more fingers on the button, the lower the average IQ per button. That's just life statistics. Closed club control. Open sale panic buying. For now, America still acts as the procurator of the planet. Not holy. Not fair. But the procurator. And the procurator of the planet does not want the fate of the world decided by yet another land collector running expired imperial software with an army stuck on a previous version update. For Washington, allowing that would be like installing a home alarm system and handing out the keys to the neighbors and the burglars, just in case. That's why the procurator of the planet is still holding the door shut with its foot. Because the billionaire's world does not want to depend on a random regional strongman with a nuclear briefcase. A political taxi driver who was suddenly handed command of an aircraft carrier. Second issue: Iran's long-range ballistic missile program. Israel demands it be shut down completely. Not slowed. Not limited. Shut down. Zeroed out. Swept clean. Buried in concrete. Because the last 12-day war showed something very simple. This isn't a mock-up, not a parade prop, not a cartoon. Missiles fly. They hit. They get through. 33 out of roughly 1,500 incoming lethal rockets penetrated the defensive shield. That's no longer garage-level production. That's military Amazon fast delivery, no returns. Why is Israel so uncompromising here? Because they know the market price of the phrase, "we will destroy you." Sure, some say Israel is always nervous. Correct. People who are promised death on a schedule rarely stay relaxed. If Iran keeps long-range missile capability, the risk to the United States multiplies. Today the missile hits a neighbor. Tomorrow a continent. The day after with a special payload inside. Russian post accept intercontinental, armed, and no return to sender. Now why this risk for the US is not theoretical. Give Iran long-range missiles and in a few years it's no longer a regional threat. It's intercontinental delivery. Today a slogan. Tomorrow a missile. Next a missile with a surprise package. Death to America plus premium subscription plan. If the Islamic Republic is allowed to keep expanding long-range ballistic capability, the probability of direct threat to the United States rises sharply. And what's the guarantee that one day it won't be one missile but 100 with who knows what kind of warheads heading toward America itself? Death to America and death to Israel are not being chanted by Chinese parliamentary delegates. Not by North Korean assembly members. Not by Russian state deputies. Iranian lawmakers put on IRGC uniforms and shout it in chorus. That's not stand-up comedy. Not a corporate retreat. Not cosplay team building. Someone says, "Relax, it's just words." People shout things all the time. They're just trying to curry favor with the regime. Really? One particular figure also started with just words. Said Ukraine never existed at all. Said it was an invention. A historical mistake. Back then many people said, relax, it's rhetoric. Political theater. Just warming up the audience. This oddball, a scholar turned state leader, suddenly declared, probably unexpectedly even for himself, that Ukraine had never existed before Soviet times. That it simply wasn't there in human history before the Ukrainian SSR inside the Soviet Union. Well, who knows what strange ideas pop into a scholar's head, right? And the lawmakers nodded along obediently, also trying to please the regime. And that later allowed the scholar-turned-ruler to unleash such a disaster that the map of Europe started to smoke. Because when someone in power denies a country's existence, that's not an opinion. That's a technical brief for invasion. He's no longer a galley slave, now he's a concubine in someone else's imperial harem. Words from people in power are not air. They are blueprints for future destruction. First madness in speeches, then blood on the news. Just a phrase. Just an opinion. And it ended with Europe's map looking like designers fought over it with a chainsaw. Words in power are not sound. They are down payments on action. So when officials shout wild things, take them wildly seriously. Israel knows this better than anyone. First they shouted at them. Then they paid others. Then they shot at them. Terrorism works like this, first the slogan, then the grant, then the grenade. And that's the third pillar in any attempted deal funding militants. If a state consistently pays armed groups, that's not complex regional policy. That's a terrorism subscription plan premium account, no ads, auto-renewal. October 7th wasn't a spontaneous clash. It was financed, prepared, and ideologically fed. Years of propaganda, money, weapons, training. First slogans. Then suitcases of cash. Then massacre.
Terrorism is when hatred is first packaged as an idea, then as a budget, and finally as an operation, a business plan with assault rifles attached. And when a regime of any state systematically finances terrorist organizations, that state clearly qualifies as a sponsor of terrorism. The fourth point in any attempted deal is how a regime treats its own people. A system responsible for the mass killing of tens of thousands of its own citizens, a truly prehistoric regime, has no moral right to exist. Even if, in reality, this is the point America cares about the least. It's always the one mentioned first whenever someone wants to talk about humanity, morality, or justify something. Here's the paradox. This point is always first in speeches and last in actual priorities. Human rights in big politics are like a rosemary twig on a steak, added for presentation, never eaten. The conclusion is simple: there will be no full deal. Too many mutually exclusive never clauses. So what is Trump supposed to do? On paper, overwhelming power is on his side. You'd get tired just listing the carrier groups and megatons of hardware. The power is there: fleet, air force, steel, numbers, budgets, like a blockbuster trailer. But we've already seen how this second army in the world planned a 3-day victory and arrived in year 4. Absolute force without brains is a bodybuilder who can't open a door and just keeps headbutting it. If America allows a tactical nuclear incident or loses a major ship, that's it. The world prosecutor becomes the world defendant. China won't just eat popcorn. It'll open a popcorn factory. One successful strike, one major ship sunk, one nuclear incident, even a tactical one. And that's it. The prosecutor of the planet becomes the former prosecutor of the planet. World order doesn't stand on morality. It stands on the reputation of strength. If strength glitches, the line of challengers forms instantly. China won't even turn off the microwave. It'll just add a new setting. Reheat America. If the US backs down, it loses face. If it moves forward, it risks everything. So America's stake right now is no smaller than that of the Islamic Republic's regime itself. Of course, President Trump faces a strong temptation to agree to a nuclear deal only, without regime change. The Islamic Republic shifts a gram, makes a tiny concession, and everyone's happy. Everyone pretends they won. Everyone applauds. Everyone takes pictures. Geopolitics level. Let's call this fitness, even though we just stood next to the dumbbells. The Saudis are satisfied. A weak Iran is better than a strong one. No official bomb. And life goes on like grandma used to make it. Because if Iran's regime were replaced with a pro-American one, in a few years it could achieve prosperity and become strong. Saudi Arabia does not want a strong Iran. Not under any circumstances. Turkey is satisfied. A whole Iran is better than a fragmented one. Otherwise the Kurds might get inspired and start assembling their own puzzle. And then instead of dreams of a new Ottoman sphere, the Sultan would get a fever attack. America is interested in Turkey too, because Turkey is what prevents Russian naval power from fully expanding and dominating the Black Sea. Qatar is satisfied. Sanctions smell like money. That's who profits from sanctioned Iranian oil. You could even say a large share of Qatar's economy is tied to dividends from sanctioned Iranian oil. With a new Iran, completely different players would control that oil. Trump declares himself king of the hill, crowns himself, fires his own salute, gives himself a standing ovation. Everyone is satisfied, except the problem itself, and except Israel. But Israel is used to that. It's a garrison state, and it will receive more funding for the garrison anyway. But let's assume America doesn't stop there. Things can burn fast. Just listen to how aggressively some Israeli propagandists hype and celebrate the prospect of a U.S. strike on Iran. They're heating up an already militant society, already militant citizens. Well then strike and change the regime. But what's really at stake is a genuine existential risk for America itself if it miscalculates. So what should America actually do? Because even the strongest possible strike on Iran won't automatically change the regime. Bombs don't change regimes. Bombs change the landscape. Who would govern afterward? The opposition is fragmented. The crown prince in exile is a media figure, not a mass leader. The country is complex, ethnically fractured. If it all collapses, it will burn so hard that the Middle East will look like a regional branch of hell. And this is where history comes back into the picture. Iran, 1951. A democratically elected prime minister, Mossadegh, comes to power. He clashes with Britain and the United States. He nationalizes Iranian oil. Britain, furious. America, calculating. The CIA launches an operation. Money, bribery, paid street protests, work with military officers, information leaks, loyalty purchased from generals. CIA operation budget, $1 million. By today's standards, that's barely enough for a mid-level Washington lobbyist and a parking space. The result, the prime minister arrested, the Shah restored, power flipped, the country redirected, not with tanks, with briefcases and shoulder boards. Why bet on the regular army rather than the ideological IRGC Guard? Because the IRGC protects the clerical regime. The army wants the country not to fall apart, and salaries paid on time. Ideology dies for an idea. The army serves under contract. That's more predictable. And now the finale. The real stake right now is not the deal. Not Iran. Not Israel. Not even the Middle East. The stake is the office of the planet's prosecutor. If America misses, if it strikes but fails to finish, if it starts but can't hold, if it shows weakness, the world will understand one thing. The sheriff no longer shoots straight. The sheriff isn't what he used to be. And then the clearance sale of fear begins. Regional players turn into global troublemakers. Nuclear buttons multiply like cockroaches. And the world order won't end with an explosion, but with a carnival of madness featuring a nuclear pavilion. And then no one will ask permission anymore. They'll just press the button. And this is where the most interesting part begins, and the most uncomfortable part for people who like simple explanations. The Prime Minister of Israel is flying to Washington not to persuade Trump to bomb, and not to persuade him not to bomb, and not to wave around secret Epstein files, as some couch conspiracy theorists with YouTube diplomas have already imagined. Blackmail is how you start divorces, not regime change. He's going to talk about names, ranks, specific generals inside the Islamic Republic who might be ready to flip the table. And under what guarantees, what conditions, and for what price. Not slogans, not emotions, not tweets, but the good old technology of power transfer. Who opens the gates, when, and for how much? Because bombs can blow off a roof. Power is changed with keys from the inside. Geopolitics is not the Avengers. It's accounting with tanks. The question now is not whether America can strike. It can. The question is whether it's ready to finish the job. Because if you start and don't finish, the planet's prosecutor becomes a witness in his own case. If you strike and get hit back, a line of volunteers eager to test, so this is allowed now, will stretch from Tehran to Taipei. If you miss, the world order gets fired without severance pay. And the key shot in this movie is not a missile, not an aircraft carrier, not a bomber, a signature on a decision you can't rewind. So what will Trump choose? Press the button, make a deal, or pretend it was all just a very loud bluff? Because in world politics, like in poker, worse than a bad bet is a showdown with no cards. When regime change is on the table, the cards are never public, only signals for insiders. And if Trump decides to move, there will be a spy-style signal. At this level of the game, cards are never shown. At most, someone gets to see just the corner of the card back. There's a good story from the first Cold War. After Khrushchev was removed from power in 1964, he lived under quiet supervision at his dacha and dictated his recollections. That's how the famous Khrushchev memoirs were created. The recordings were secretly copied. A key role was played by his son-in-law, Alexei Adzubiai, the former editor-in-chief of Izvestia. Through trusted channels, the materials were smuggled to the West. When the memoirs were delivered abroad, the publishers said, "Great, but how do we know this isn't fake, edited, or a friendly hello from the KGB?" So they came up with a brilliantly simple solution. A public sign of authenticity. A newspaper photo of Khrushchev wearing a hat. Signal received. It's real. Go to print. No digital signatures. No blockchain. Just a hat. And world history goes to press. Geopolitics is a world of strange confirmations, where sometimes a single photograph means more than a division of troops. And if today some Iranian general needs a guarantee that the planet's prosecutor will cover him, it won't be a press release, not a tweet, and definitely not a story post. It will be a signal, one delivered to him by the Israeli Prime Minister. For example, Trump appears on Truth Social and then before the press, wearing a hat and a ZZ Top-style beard, holding an electric guitar, playing a solo in front of a map of Iran. That means the package is approved, the check is written, the curtain is about to fall. Because coups don't start with a gunshot. Coups start with a sign that only insiders understand. And the question remains the same. Who puts on the hat this time? And who loses the crown afterward?